Live streaming. Okay, my computer's just giving me a bit of a hard time this morning, but we can make a start and it'll load back up again. Right, good morning. Happy New Year to everyone. And welcome to Adult Select. This is our council meeting. There's a couple of extra items which have been included on today. I'm going to go around the members to start with and then the officers. And I've got a couple of members of the public with us today. Peter, good morning to you. Peter Farley. Good morning. Yes, thank you. And we've got somebody from finance there. You'll be handling the budget questions today, yes? Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Right, let me go around the table. I'm Simon Howarth. I'm a member for Llanelli Ward, and I'm the chair of Adult Select. And Happy New Year to everyone if you're watching. And I'll go around with members, starting at the back there. Start with Val and yourself and work your way down, okay?
Morning, Chairman. I'm here observing Val Smith.
Tyrone Stokes, Finance Manager for Social Care and Health.
I'm Martin Croker. I'm the member for Lansdowne in Abergavenny, and I'm a member of this committee.
County Councillor Lisa Dimmock of the Arms Endy and member of committee.
Councillor Paul Pavia, committee member.
Councillor Louise Brown, Shire Newton Ward, member of the committee and vice chair. Thank you.
Councillor Jane Pratt, member of the committee and Llanelli Ward.
Councillor Penny Jones, I'm cabinet member for Social Services, Safeguarding and Health.
Claire Marchant, Chief Officer, Social Care and Health.
Julie Boothroyd, Head of Adult Services.
Wendy Barnard, Democratic Services.
Hazel Eilert, Scrutiny.
Thank you. Peter Farley, I'm the chair of the Chepstow Senior Citizens Welfare Trust and was previously a county councillor and indeed chair of this committee.
Right, good morning everyone, and thank you for your attendance today. Not a very nice morning to get in here, but have a safe journey home if I forget that at the end. I'll start off with apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies, please?
Yes, apologies for absence from Councillors Sheila Woodhouse, Ruth Edwards and Roger Harris, but Tony Easton is substituting.
Okay, thanks for that, Wendy. Declarations of interest as and when, everyone, yep. Open public forum. Peter, we'll allow you in on the agenda item. We've moved the agenda around so you don't have to sit through all the meeting. Are you happy with that one, Fiat?
Very happy, Chair. Thank you very much.
Special things for special people. And we've got agenda item number 4 then. We've got no members of the public in here, bar Peter. No, nothing to be asked. Peter, have you anything you want to ask about anything else then on the agenda as you're here?
No, I'm very happy with the circumstances that bring me here.
Okay.
There may be things that arise in discussion that will need to be perhaps pursued in different ways or elsewhere, but I'm very happy with the basis for today. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you. Right, agenda number 4, just agree the minutes of the meeting on the 30th of October as a true and accurate record. Is everybody happy with them as a true and accurate record? Jane, I've got proposer, seconder. Paul, thank you everyone. Show of hands, please. Thank you. You don't want to go through the pages. No? Everybody happy with that? Abstain, that's okay. Right, okay. Right, we're going to move agenda item number 7 forward. And this is the Aneurin Bevan University Health Board redesigning mental health services for older people. And this is our draft consultation response. Who would like to take us through that to start with? Claire, will you be happy just to go through that response with us, members, and then ask some questions, members? Okay? Everybody happy with that? And then I'll bring you in. Thanks, Claire.
Okay, thanks very much, Chair. Members will be very well versed and briefed in terms of the issues which Aneurin Bevan University Health Board are consulting on in respect of the future of older adult mental health services across the Greater Gwent region. This is a draft response from the Council to that consultation, and what the draft response attempts to do is to reflect the views of members which have been expressed, particularly in the seminar which we held, which was attended by officers from Aneurin Bevan Health Board, but also views that have been expressed in other settings. And obviously there's been quite an extensive consultation and engagement process conducted by the Health Board, and members have engaged very actively in that consultation process. I don't intend to go through the detail of the proposals because I think those are very well known to members. In terms of the consultation response itself, what I would welcome in terms of finalising this response for consideration at the council meeting is views as to whether the issues that are raised in that response are the right ones from a scrutiny perspective. If there are other issues which you would wish to see reflected within that response for consideration by council, and really just to understand from a scrutiny perspective if the response has captured the issues which are important to you as members. This would be a very significant recommendation to council because I think it would be the first time that this council has taken a formal stance against a proposal from the Health Board going forward. And that would be something which, if that is recommended to council and then endorsed by council, a significant view for the council to take. So this is a serious matter. It's a serious set of proposals which concern some of our most vulnerable citizens. The response itself sets out issues in terms of demography, in terms of access, rurality, in terms of the plan around Chepstow Hospital going forward, in terms of community services for older adults with mental health issues, finances, and the whole issue around equality impact assessment and understanding what underpins and analysis underpins really the option appraisal which is set out in the consultation document. So, you know, it's your response as members. It needs to be really owned and properly scrutinised. And that's really all I've got to say in introduction. I'm here to listen and then to reflect back in the final version, which will go to council, any additional points from a scrutiny perspective.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to say on that? Cabinet member?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say, to reiterate that this decision to present this draft response has not been taken lightly. You know, it's not a them and us situation, but it does identify the severity of the actual proposals and the feeling behind it. So we really must get our responses together and take on board everybody's ideas and present the right response for the Nairon Bevan in the hope that they will listen. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Penny. Members, questions, Tony. Can we have your mic torn, please?
Right, that's better. Yes, I thank the officers for getting involved and behind members and the public in this matter, because I feel that it is very, very important that we provide a united front. I think the report is an excellent report. I've been to quite a number of sessions with the public and throughout the south of Monmouthshire particularly, and I think it reflects really what the public are saying. I think you've touched on the important bit as the future of Chepstow Hospital. I know that this is a particular issue about the dementia ward, but it really lays down what we need to be doing in the future for Chepstow Hospital, for the south of the county. I also noticed that whilst we've been arguing for the retention of services within Chepstow, we've tried to include Morro Vale and the north of Monmouthshire because they're more particularly affected really because of the issues that they have of getting from A to B should this decision be taken. So I'm happy with the report. I found nothing wrong with it. Oh, one thing I did find, I think the members' seminar was the 16th of November, not the 26th. I think that was the day we came to meet you in the morning before we started moving forward. So in general terms, I'm supportive of the consultation. No doubt council will have another crack at this on week Thursday. And I hope that they will give as much support as I feel that you've given the public in Monmouthshire.
Thanks, Tony. Louise?
Yeah, I did my own sort of detailed consultation response to this and sent it to the Chief Executive. And basically, I'm very pleased that the council are arguing against this particular option. But I think, in fact, it would be helpful if the response from the council, and I'm happy to forward the letter I sent in, would be supporting option 1, because the health board report actually mentioned the different options, and option 1 is a much fairer option because it provides local access across the borough areas. It provides similar staffing levels across the borough areas, the right people in the right location, a good geographical spread, because there's actually going to be the health board area will cover the south, north and west, but there'll be absolutely no provision in the east of the health board area. It avoids having no provision in Monmouthshire, which is an area with a high elderly population, which I think has already been said in the response. But in fact, it works out that there are more older people in this area than in the average, and I think that's already been covered in the draft response. I think but basically, it's about having a good geographical spread, and it's about the stress upon the family and carers of long journeys and provides local hospital care. And it stops the modern hospital at Chepstow being underutilised. Obviously, it prevents discrimination against the elderly and disabled patients and carers who in option 3 will have to struggle up a steep hill where St Woolis Newport is based, get 2 buses in order to get there, with a limited bus service from Newport Central. If they go by car, the drivers will have struggled to park, whereas Chepstow is centrally located with parking on a flat area, and staff are already in place to follow option 1 with no disruption at all to both staff and patients. But the other reason why we should really object to this is because option 3 is in fact practically totally unworkable. It's been presented that basically patients, when they close the 15 ward, if they do that as set in the proposal, will there be patients from the South Monmouthshire will go to St Woolis Newport, and patients from the North of Monmouthshire will go to Ebervale. But the reality is that the 14 dementia beds at St Woolis will stay the same, and Ebervale will increase the dementia beds from 7 to 15, meaning an increase of 8 dementia beds. However, with the loss of 15 dementia beds at Chepstow, this will result in an overall loss of 7 dementia beds across the 3 hospitals, with the 2 remaining hospitals of St Woolis, Newport and Ebervale proposed to cover Monmouthshire. Chepstow Hospital already has the highest occupancy rate of 93% and 89% in 2016 and 17, and in view of this extremely high demand should be kept. Newport has an occupancy of 88.69% in 2016, with no increase in dementia beds in option 3 staying at 14. In summary, this means that the reality of patients going from Chepstow to St Woolis Newport for inpatient dementia care is simply a myth, because there will be little or no extra bed number capacity to do so, bearing in mind the current high occupancy rates with no patient increase at St Woolis Newport. It means that Chepstow patients may well end up going to Ebervale or Ystrad Minith. And the journey times and cost of travel for the elderly residents and carers to get to these hospitals are totally unacceptable and unrealistic. I've worked out that if you haven't got a car, then it's approximately 2 hours, I think it's about 1 hour and 30 or something. You've got to go through Cardiff to get to Ystrad, and you've got to go through Cardiff to get to Ebervale. So, in fact, it's quicker for patients from Chepstow to get by public transport to Ystrad or Ebervale, which is where they'll probably end up because of the lack of spaces or increase in St Woolis. It's quicker for Chepstow people to get to Birmingham New Street than it is to get to these 2 hospitals. So frankly, I just think it hasn't been thought out adequately, and it's totally unworkable. And I think the health board should take account of the fact the normal stress and strain of looking after someone with dementia without adding to it. If you've got a patient that's going to be in Ystrad, you've got no public transport, no car as a sort of a carer, it means that you're going to have almost a 4-hour journey just to visit. Now, that is just not on. And I've had a situation in my ward where an elderly couple were found dead. I think the wife was suffering from dementia and also from Parkinson's, and I think this just illustrates the stress and strain that people who are the carers of people, and I think we've got to consider that there might be additional costs from them actually having to be treated for depression and illness themselves through being put under this unrealistic strain. And, I just really hope that they go for option one, which is basically to retain the current situation. And, I'm sorry if I'm probably coming across as, too forceful on this, but I really think it's just totally unworkable. And I think it needs to be thoroughly reconsidered. And I just hope that the savings that they're talking about in terms of 846,000K, these will actually be no savings at all, because there will be additional stresses on primary care services from dementia carers actually needing to seek help because of the stress and strain of looking after somebody and having to go under that horrendous journey every day, even if they just want to visit.
Thank you, Louise. Very valid points. Would you like to respond to that, Claire?
I think a number of the points made sort of build upon some of the points within the consultation draft response. The issue I'm particularly interested in is that, Councillor Brown, you're talking about a positive recommendation back to the Health Board to say that we support option one, and I would really welcome a view from scrutiny as to whether they would support that as a positive sort of conclusion to the consultation response. We've left it at the moment in the draft consultation response without proposing a positive option, or recommendation against one of the other options. But Councillor Brown, that recommendation that you've made within your own personal response for option one, I would welcome a view from scrutiny members about whether that's something that should be put to council.
Okay, thank you. What's your thoughts on that? Any more questions? Peter, would you like to come in on this now, because it's important that we hear what your views are?
I could just make a few comments then, and if I could congratulate the councillor on her remarks just now, a very clear addition to the already good document that is before you. I'd like to take a slightly different approach in this respect. I think the Health Board clearly, as your response, Claire, shows, haven't actually learned from previous experience. And one of the things that I would be looking for in the Council's response, it may be there, is the idea that we mustn't have something like this happen again. And so this is more than the specific service under discussion. It's actually about the quality of the Health Board's engagement, the means by which it consults. My experience in this instance was initially as an ordinary resident in Chepstow, coming across a reference to the consultation, quite by chance, in one of the local newspapers. I went along to the meeting that was held in the leisure centre. I actually felt for the Health Board team who came to present. They did a good job, but they were in the midst of a firestorm that could easily have been avoided. The firestorm was, they were talking about the need to make changes to a service overall. The immediate cause of the war was they're going to close a ward at Chepstow. That was unfortunate, because actually what got lost was some important points about maintaining a viable and effective service, and that got lost in the discussion. So first point, I would want to see somewhere in the Council's response something along the lines of offering, suggesting, demanding, it's up to you, the tone, to work together on future consultations, and at an earlier stage. A lot of this could have been avoided. It was also unfortunate that in Chepstow, in the meeting I'm referring to, I know there have been others, there was no opportunity for people there to hear about what was going on around the service. There was no opportunity to hear about the excellent work that Claire and Julie's services offer around all of this. So it was very kind of one-dimensional. So that's the first point. The second point, this is maybe a bit more speculative, and it might not be so easy for a county such as Monmouthshire. But it did occur to me that some of the issues that the Health Board is facing might actually be within the county's gift, at least to suggest some help. I'm thinking of staff recruitment and retention. I'm thinking of the packages that the Health Board clearly needs to provide to attract staff, to retain staff. And I had wondered whether such things as offering favourable access to leisure services, possibly even looking at whether underused housing could be brought into play to help meet staff accommodation needs, that sort of thing. I thought that would be worth a punt, quite frankly. And finally, on those things that were missing where we might be able to help, in Monmouthshire specifically, there is the transport issue. I think Claire's draft and Councillor Brown's comments just now addressed that extremely well. But you could be forgiven for forgetting that the County Council actually is a transport provider, may actually have some leverage over the accessibility of services. So, for example, if, and I hope it doesn't happen, if it turns out that a more remote location than Chepstow has to be where people go and their relatives need to go, I wondered whether the council, possibly in collaboration with Newport in this instance and others, could be addressing the question of whether existing transport routes and methods were fit for this purpose. I don't quite know how that could be done. You might want to discount it, but the theme is all of a piece. County Council and Health Board have responsibilities in this area, and I think the idea that there should be more joint working is absolutely spot on, so good for that. Final point, I'll make it now, although it may belong elsewhere, and is a general one, and isn't necessarily to do with this specific instance. But I'm thinking, as indeed Councillor Eason and Councillor Pavir, to their credit, have done, they've thought about a whole lot of issues in their motions. One of those is how the south of the county becomes engaged or not, as the case may be, in any issues of this sort. I can remember previous meetings of this committee where the same point has been made, that the accessibility of particular age groups or interest groups or communities to fora where issues can be explored and ideas sought, they vary across the county. If you're in, I don't know, at the risk of offending Councillor Grucott on my left, if you're in Abergavenny, it sometimes strikes me you have a better deal in terms of accessibility to fora for these matters than you do in the south. There is no forum for older people in the south of the county of which I am aware. There's nothing like the groups that were set up in Monmouth and Abergavenny. This is an historical thing. I may be being unfair, but I think this is a tremendous opportunity. And I will publicly offer such support as the Senior Citizens Trust can offer. At least we can provide a venue where some of these things could be tackled. So I think that's it for the moment. So an emphasis from my point of view now on prevention and recognising the excellent response that is already being considered, and congratulating the councillors who have gone into this issue both prior to today and today in such depth. Councillor Pavir is a trustee of the Chepstow Senior Citizens Welfare Trust, and I'm really glad that you've been taking a lead on this, Paul.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Are there any members who want to ask any more questions? Because there is some... Yes, Paul.
Thanks, Chair. Can I thank Peter for his kind words? It's great to see him here. Just in terms of the report itself, tone is great. Detail, I think you've captured most things. I don't think I went to as many sessions as Councillor Easton. I think I went to 3 as well as the session here. But in terms of what I thought was coming out, you know, the initial focus of the Health Board was on the backdrop of clinical safety and the challenges of workforce planning. I think you were right to address in the report there's no real focus on how to improve the service or develop the service going forward, which was right. You know, from the sessions and from the public feedback, transport is a massive issue for them, and I think they really come unstuck with some of the transport challenges that have been highlighted not just by councillors but by members of the public. The issue of workforce, it is a national issue. I do appreciate that, but they've also got to, the board has also got to take some blame as a commissioner of education posts and ensuring there's a good throughput through higher education, and ensuring that there are staff being properly trained through. I think Peter Farley was absolutely right in terms of recruitment and retention of the sessions that I went to, and those members of the public who were nurses, either for the health board or through neighbouring health boards. There were some working across the border as well. Clearly, they're not doing enough in terms of recruitment and retention. That was plainly obvious. I mean, and the USP of option 3 for the health board was that there would be this 840 odd £1,000 that Councillor Brown has just identified, that it would be reinvested in local services. Well, okay, that there was no sort of pulling back from that money would disappear into Llangfachford Grange. But from the last session that I went to and Councillor Easton went to in Caldecott, there was a reticence to say that money was going to come to the south of Monmouthshire. There was a sort of, well, maybe there's a tacit acceptance that there's a demographic challenge here in Monmouthshire, but because of comorbidities and complexities of patient need due to public health challenges in other parts of the health board footprint, that money may go elsewhere. It may go to Caerphilly, may go to Blaen y Gwent because of those other challenges, because of patient demand. So for me, in terms of final recommendation, I think that we had a strong card to play when we said to them we weren't involved in the initial options appraisal. I think we should say, look, we're not going to endorse any of your options here. We'll go back to the options appraisal and let's start from scratch in an integrated approach, as Peter's just said. I think that's the best approach for us to take. Thank you.
Could I just ask though, Paul, on that basis then, where Councillor Brown was saying about option 1, you prefer to leave it status quo and go back to the drawing board again and start yeah, okay.
and include us in that developmental process.
Councillor Brown, would you be happy with that? Because I had no issues with your recommendation is we go for option 1 and proceed from that. But if Paul believes that we go for status quo, but
would a better approach be to I mean, I've forwarded to Claire the letter that I sent, arguing about option 1 and so forth. Would to cover all things, would it be better to argue about option 1, but also to say that you think you need to go from consulting on it, from the outset as being suggested by, and then you'd have the benefit of both, because if they ignored the suggestion about, starting and looking at all options again, then the problem is that you haven't even put in, let's go for option 1, which out of all of them is probably the better one.
So you're saying keep it on the fence, but if need be, go for option 1.
Sorry.
I'm just going to answer Louisa's point there. Yeah. Can I just be clear then? So what you're saying is go for option 1 at a last resort, or include it within the response.
Well, I would like to see it included in the response, but also to say that in any event that it should have been consulted properly in all of the options with the local authority in any event. And
I think that there's probably a way through which combines both points. Taking Councillor Paviour's point, which I think is a really strong one that was made in initial correspondence from the leader when we first became aware of this, the fact that local authority wasn't involved in an integrated way in the option appraisal is a really strong point, and there's been a number of points made in the consultation response about perhaps deficits as we may perceive them in that option appraisal, and that's a critical one. As an interim measure, we've got option one, haven't we? Because they'd already made that change on an emergency basis because they couldn't secure clinical safety and standards of care off across the substantive way of working. So we could frame back that we would be understanding that they would need to continue to work to the configuration of services as set out in option one, whilst that integrated approach to appraising options and seeing older adult mental health inpatient services as part of an integrated whole system approach, rather than coming at it from that acute perspective and everything else kind of supports that, gives us a way forward in terms of a positive suggestion about how we work together, because I think we've tried to make the very strong points that we are very committed to working in partnership with the Health Board. We've got a very long history of doing that. We are currently working in partnership with them around the future of services in the south of the county, and we need to do that for the future of these services as well.
Would you be happy with that, both of you? Yeah? Yeah? Okay. Paul? Yeah.
I mean, for me, Chair, is that they acknowledge the work that the Chief Officer is doing with Nick Wood, but they've sort of parked that, but it's running parallel, and I think that needs to be accelerated. We need to see what the local offer, the local model is before taking any service away. That's my view, and I think you've probably touched on that there in that response.
Councillor Grewcott and then Councillor Leeson.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Paviour's suggestion is a very eminently sensible one. And in a sense, if we just reject the whole lot, in the sense we are accepting option one, which says do nothing, I think we need to go back to the foundations here and say there are two very big organisations with responsibility for care of the elderly. The local authority is one of those, the Health Board is another, and that they should go together in harmony, not one side going along and presenting a fait accompli to the other. I think we do need to go right back to the start, and while I have sympathy with particularly the issue that the Councillor Paviour raised about lack of qualified staff in the health authority, a parallel would be the local authority saying, we have a problem with teachers in the south of the county, we'll close schools. We just could not do that. And I think it's a very close parallel here. And I think we need to say, hang on, you have ignored us as an equal partner in care for the elderly. Let's start again and go forward together.
Yes, Penny.
Can I just come in and say, also behind all this is why Chepstow? There are a lot of other areas, and we still haven't had a satisfactory answer as to why they've chosen Chepstow. Was it an easy option? And if so, why? There's an awful lot to go on, and I think the more generic we keep it at this point rather than specific, we just go right back to basics and say, let's start again.
Councillor Dimmock.
I just want to follow up on an email I sent you, Claire, at the beginning of December, because a statement made by Nyren Bevan Health Board at the Bourke Community Centre consultation, they advised residents that were questioning how are you going to transport patients, carers, to and from the south of the county to Newport, and they stated that Monmouthshire County Council are developing a plan for that. And now I know you've had a meeting on, was it the 20th, with Sam and Miranda and Nikki? I just wanted to follow up on what was said in that meeting. But also, with regards to the model they described, this centre of excellence, that is Chepstow. That's one point I really strongly want to get across. That is Chepstow. The way they say the design, the layout. I don't see that in St Willis.
In terms of that point around transport, obviously we're engaged in lots and lots of discussions about improving transport offers, particularly for people who are frail and vulnerable, and there have been meetings of our officers with officers of the Health Board to that effect. We had developed a proposal a little while ago which we'd hoped would attract integrated care funding, which would help to offset those difficulties from a well-being point of view. They certainly weren't specific to this particular issue, but looking at how we can build on, very good schemes that we've got in place around volunteer transport already within the county, and make sure that's working even further. I guess what we might have hoped is that some of the resource being realised from the Health Board, if they do make changes, needs to go into investing in some of that transport infrastructure because of the impact on our very vulnerable carers, which has already been spoken about in this meeting. I think the Health Board accepts that with all the changes that are being made to services as a consequence of the Grange Hospital being developed, that they need a transport plan as a health board, but they obviously need to work with their 5 constituent authorities around that. I was perhaps a little surprised that it was batted back to being just a local authority responsibility to resolve these transport issues. I think, as with all of this, as has been said, we've got and particularly through our Public Service Board and our wellbeing plans, we have collective partnership responsibilities around addressing the issues which our county is facing. Transport is one of those critical issues, and as some services become more centralised and move out of our county, then making sure there's a transport infrastructure is a responsibility for both ourselves and our partners in the Health Board. But when they're making and advocating particular changes, they need to put in place plans which address those particular issues.
Could I just drift away just 2 seconds now, because we did have a pre-meeting and rural isolation came up in that pre-meeting, and while we're just touching this subject about these things, Louise, did you just want to comment to the officers on your thoughts and your comments you made in the pre-meeting about the isolation that you feel and the vulnerability of a lot of people within Monmouthshire in aspects of this? Because Peter touched on that as well, didn't you? And I think it's important while we're here now, we'll touch on it now, and then I'll bring Tony in. Louise?
I wasn't sure whether it was related to this particular discussion.
Well, it's not related to it, but we've touched on it quite a few times within this discussion, and you felt really strong about it in the pre-meeting, and I think it is actually going to touch on this slightly, isn't it, about i.e. we've got vulnerable people there who have got that isolation as well, which they have. We know where they are, especially in rural areas and rural communities. There's no transport links there at all, but it was something you thought that we as a council should be actually looking at even deeper. Correct?
Yeah, I think the issue is obviously loneliness and isolation in general, and I find that particularly in rural areas, and I know that there's certain centres that the council has concentrated on, but I suppose it's developing that policy, but it also, I suppose, links in with the stress and strain that carers are under, who often the whole of their day is orientated about visiting their partner, and they don't necessarily have the support networks if family or even friends, because their whole world is centred around their partner being ill and visiting them in hospital and so forth. And I don't really, to be honest with you, think that even if you got a transport plan that was from door to door would solve this issue, because the issue is really of time and stress and strain. So if you're having a 4-hour journey to get to a hospital just to visit a patient who is suffering from dementia, your nearest and dearest, then just the journey itself is going to put an additional stress and strain on you. For example, I've seen people in my community who are elderly and their partner's been in the Royal Gwent, and then they've been transferred to Chepstow, which in Chepstow Hospital is a very good hospital, and you can just see when you talk to them the absolute relief on their face, because they can locally go and visit a relative and they haven't got all the stress and strain of getting to Newport. Even if they've got a car, themselves. And I think that you can't underestimate the need to have local health services based where they are actually needed. And that is what option one does. So, you know, however money you put into alternative sources, I think that the proposal that's being put forward is a bad idea. And also, I actually think that it hasn't been given full consideration because of the fact that we had a meeting for the Lower Wye Committee, and the Chief Operating Officer came along and told us that the dementia ward in Chepstow was not closing. Subsequently, the draft minutes have been amended to say that was the proposal at the time. This meeting was on the 10th of September. On the 17th of September, there was a report to the Health Board with the option of this closing. That is a week later. So I don't think sufficient consideration has been given to this. So, I mean, that's a good argument to ask for reconsideration as well.
Tony, can you hang on 2 seconds? Councillor Jane Pratt. Jane?
Thank you, Chair. I don't really want to ask a question, but I would just like to say that I feel that the way the Health Board approached this was absolutely wrong right from the start, and obviously we've seen the disastrous consequences that it would have. What really concerns me, and I think we've had some excellent responses from councillors today, is that they're just looking for a quick fix, and they haven't thought about the long-term implications for the residents of Monmouthshire. And that those have been highlighted by my colleagues, and it is very, very disgraceful that they're quite happy to make decisions like this which are not sustainable, and they really are going to affect the quality of life of people living here in a very negative way. So I'm really pleased with the stance that the council have taken. I fully support you, and I would like to thank Peter for coming along today, and also to councillors Eason and Pavia for the excellent work that they've done in bringing this to our attention and making sure that this appalling plan does not get our support. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Tony?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The conversation this morning has gone the way I thought it was going to go, and I support Councillor Brown's view. I think you brought it in a bit earlier than I thought it might come in, because I believe that whilst we're responding to the consultation, I believe that we should also have our plan as well. And I do believe that I would have been bringing in option one later in the conversation, because that really fits the situation we are at the moment. It's a temporary arrangement and doesn't change anything from the point you're making, Claire, that Paul is also making. But I'll take you back to, you mentioned, Councillor Brown mentioned about the 11th or 12th of September, when you met in Lower Wye. I went to a clinical futures meeting in Monmouth on the 8th of September, and there were quite a few people, basically around Monavale and Chepstow. A lot of people from Chepstow were there, and they were asking the same questions, and the answer from the Chief Operating Officer was that there's going to be no changes. So something happened between the beginning of September and the end of September, which we're not aware of. Some decisions were made somewhere to get this consultation out. So the way I feel is that I would like to see, on Councillor Brown's recommendation, that we look at option one, which is one I was going to come to, because I believe that is where we are at the moment. It's a temporary situation. It doesn't detract from Councillor Pavia's view that we should look at the whole sphere. And after a recommendation to Council next week, in addition to the recommendation next week, as to what we feel ought to be the future. And the future, I believe, should be looking at option one now, to keep the situation as it is, and pick up Councillor Pavia's view that we should have a broader inward look at where we're going with dementia care across the county, based particularly on our Monmouthshire County Council's perspective in the future for Crick Road. So I think they should all be brought together. So I support Councillor Brown's point that yes, option one is the best option to be with at the moment and push for, maybe make a permanent one, I'm not so sure, but to support Councillor Pavia's view that we should look at the whole picture in the whole mix. But we need, I think, to have a response to Council next week. I'm not saying Council won't get it right, but in Council with 43 of us, we may sort of lose track of where we're going. I think we need something to put to Council next week as well, which is on a line of Councillor Brown's points.
But if everybody remembers, when we scrutinised Crick Road, the recommendations from our select was actually we need a county-wide strategy and policy on dementia care for the future. not for tomorrow or not for the week after or for the future, whether it takes 2 years to do because it's the only way forward. And Crick Road was so important, that was part of the link in this. But the long-term strategy as a council, that's what we need. And are we going to get more involved in that as a council? So it's important that we do that. And I think that was one of our recommendations from Crick Road. So I think we should include that also within the response that we're going to give to council perhaps now, next week. Not a response from this to officers. This response that we're going to give from our recommendations, from scrutinising what we've got here before us today, will go before full council. Correct? Is that what we're looking for, Tony?
Can I just add one thing?
Yeah.
In the Caldecott session the other night, I've been to all of them, so I know the score, what the answers are. I felt that the officers of United and Bevan Health Board were a bit sceptical as to where they're really going themselves. I felt that we actually made an impact on them. But there's one young lady there in particular who was very, very upset. She was in tears because her family have got particular problems and she didn't know how she would cope if this went through. Because I made a mistake in my motion. I thought this was going to be tied up around the 2021 with the Grange Hospital, but apparently it's not. It is, in their view, imminent in the next number of months if the decision is taken. So my motion isn't particularly correct, but I thought it was going to be a 2-year project, not a 2-month project. But this girl was quite upset, and I think that came over to the officers of United and Bevan Health Board. They do, I'm sort of digressing a bit, they do on a week-by-week basis adjust the manning and staffing required in Chester Hospital. They do have some difficulties getting people there, so I do appreciate they got problems. But I think we need to add to this consultation next week in Council to give some idea. Around Councillor Brown's point, option 1 is where we are at the moment. It is temporary. It will cover what we need, and we can then develop Councillor Pavia's points for the future, and also support Peter Farley's group in Chepstow, who are very concerned.
Yeah, I think we want to make sure that we're going to support option 1 being continued, because obviously, and then look at an integrated approach at a later stage. And I think it's important. I think, I'm very pleased about the draft, and I don't want to, it to come across that I'm not pleased about the draft, but I think it's just, and I'm pleased that the council have responded to say, to put the points across that have been discussed before. But I do think it's important that, because otherwise, if we don't actually put that forward, then the danger is that this dementia ward could close. And I hope that the Health Board will obviously listen to the response from the council. But if we're not clear-cut enough, the problem is going to be that we won't be in a situation to go back to the drawing board either.
Okay. We need to do the draft response, or the conclusion from today has to go out today. Is that right, Claire?
Yeah, that's just the point I was going to make. What I will do, because I'm not going to stay for the rest of the meeting, is I'm going to go away and strengthen the draft response on the basis of what I've noted from the scrutiny this morning, which has been very, very helpful. Then, if we can get from Democratic Services officers the section for the report which says this is the recommendations from scrutiny, hopefully, because I will have taken notes as well, you'll already see them reflected in that draft report. And I think getting us to a point where there's a positive recommendation about what we see the way forward as, which would be to continue, from what I've heard, with option 1 as a long-term interim, whilst we go back and do further partnership work on a long-term strategy and set of plans for dementia care services in our county, which are whole system, which pick up care at home, which pick up carer support, which pick up the future of residential care as well as the inpatient service.
Okay, Louise.
Yeah, Chair, I've forwarded the letter I sent to the Health Board with the arguments there, and hope that will help.
Okay,
thank you.
Okay, Claire, can I leave that with you, with Wendy? Email it out to members. You may pick it up today, and I think we're getting there with that one, aren't we? Yeah?
Yeah,
okay,
thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Peter, are you going to stay with us?
Thank you, no, Chair. But I would just like to congratulate the committee on taking this forward back to main council. That loop between what scrutiny considers and concludes and the full council, I think, was not always honoured in the past. I think this is a great opportunity and a good issue to do that on, if I might say so. Thank you,
Peter, and have a safe journey home. Thank you.
The point we've got to make clear, Chair, is that we have a clear and concise direction next week. That's the main thing.
What's his name? Tyrone. Good morning, Tyrone. Are you all right?
Yeah, fine, thanks.
Good, good. And Julie, you're going to stay with us, yeah?
I am.
All right, thank you. Right, Tyrone, let's go to the agenda now. Medium-term financial plan.
That's Richard.
And are you doing the capital as well?
Yes, unfortunately. I'm running two quite hefty reports today.
Okay. Yeah, use your mic, Tyrone. Do you want to just quickly take us through? I know some members have been through all this budget proposals and through all the bits and pieces, because there's a couple of documents in here, a couple of closed documents as well, isn't there, about sale of assets, etc.
Yes, it is.
If you feel that when we get to a point where we need to go into committee, if members want to ask questions, we'll go into committee and come back out again, but we'll leave them at the end. Is everybody happy with that? Yeah, okay. Right, let's move.
If I just do a general introduction like the Chair asked, every year we have to set an annual budget, but that's part of a 3 to 4 year medium-term financial plan that we set as a local authority. It's based on a number of initial assumptions that we try and make on council tax setting strategy, Welsh Government settlement. This report was done on a different set of circumstances. If I try and cast your mind back towards the end of November, beginning of December last year, this was actually agended for another meeting, but due to the snow, the meeting was cancelled. Since then, things have moved on because this was based on the provisional settlement the Welsh Government issued in October. Since then, on the 20th of December, Welsh Government have actually issued the final settlement. So the sands have just shifted a bit. But if I just talk you through it, because the underlying basis of building a budget still remains the same, but then I will highlight where the differences between the proposed settlement and the final settlement, and now that has shifted the sands a little bit. In terms of the recommendation, is highlighted on page, just give me my page reference, right, page 9, 2.1, and that's for yourselves to consider the budget setting process, the outcomes from that, and then provide any feedback so we can be taken forward to Cabinet. In order for you to consider the budget and the medium-term financial plan, like I said, I'll talk you through the process and all of the underlying assumptions. If I take you to page 10 of the report, and if we look at some of the key issues, the backdrop of austerity measures that we've seen and the impact on our revenue budget is put us under intense pressure, and unfortunately I've got no good news story to bring you for you today. This is still going to be the case for 18-19 and moving forward with the current medium-term financial plan over the next 4 years. In context, over the last 4 years the council has made savings, or at the managed savings, in the magnitude of £19 million. And in terms of adult services and the adults budget, that's borne about 1/5 of those savings over the past 4 years. Just to give you some sort of a surety around that we have actually managed those savings. It's been very difficult, but that's been the success of people like Julie and her officers in trying to make those budget savings work in what is a difficult environment in terms of moving demographics, so on and so forth. The budget for 18-19 has been built on a number of assumptions. They were built up on an initial proposal from Welsh Government in October. It was based on pay awards being 1% and inflation at 0%. This is where things have changed. Central Government has lifted that 1% cap on public sector pay to 2%, and that's now increased the budget burden. With the funding from Welsh Government, it continues to diminish. Welsh Government do have a habit of, when they publicise the budget settlement, they try and put a good success story that the offer to local authorities is increasing. But when you unpick it, what you invariably find is there are a number of grants that have come into now permanent funding. Once you strip those out, unfortunately, the increase isn't actually an increase. It can then translate into a decrease. This is no different this year in terms of adult services. We've got a number of grants that are now coming into our main revenue source of funding, such as the Welsh Independent Living Fund, for example, is now no longer a grant that's coming into the settlement, but that's shown as an increase to the local authority. But it's just the same money, just recycled under a different way. For social, in terms of savings target and setting the budget, we try to look at a unit costing exercise where we try to compare our services and our outcome and performance with other local authorities to see if we could glean anything from that exercise that could help us in terms of setting the budget and how we deliver services. Unfortunately, even though that produced some good information, it didn't give us any answers. So we've had to revert back to one of savings targets in order to try and cut our cloth accordingly. In terms of the savings target, they are detailed on page 17. If I just quickly go down to page 17, that's highlighted on 3.26, and we have got savings in the magnitude of the pressures are in page 17, sorry, bear with me. The savings are actually, yeah, page 17, sorry. They're on 3.3, and savings are in the magnitude of just short of 2.8 million. In terms of social care and health, the savings of 751,000 that we have to make to try and balance the budget. Part of the budget setting is taking into account new responsibilities. With the new responsibilities, invariably this means transferring grants over to permanent funding. And for 18-19, the responsibilities for the authority amount to just short of £2.3 million. And for social care, that's £1.1 million made up of Welsh Independent Living Fund, that's no longer a grant, coming into mainstream funding, workforce planning and secure estates. All of these were previous grant funding. They've now come into source funding. In terms of what that means for us, we've got a revenue budget of £152 million. For social care, that's just short of £45 million, and that's shown on page 19. The next steps going forward now is to go through the political process and public consultation. But unfortunately, since then, the final settlement from Welsh Government was announced on the 20th of December. There was no funding being offered to bridge the pay award increase from 1% to 2%. That's added another £1.3 million to the budget gap. And we came out being the lowest funded authority, which is no surprise. But the level of funding they gave us wasn't in line with the provisional settlement they offered in October. So this has now left us with another budget gap that we are currently working on. We've got a number of task groups that have been set up, and we will be bringing a paper to Select in February prior to going to Cabinet to see how we are going to manage or set of proposals to try and contain this extra budget pressure. Happy to take any questions.
Can I just ask a question on that point, though? We are always told that if we have any other budget proposals to put forward, savings, etc., where we feel we need to do that. That's not possible now, is it? Because at the end of the day, we've only just learned that we actually have to sort out this 2%, which has caused us another problem. So anything that we want to do as opposition, let's say, or as a council, any alternative budget proposals, the council actually hasn't balanced the books yet either to work on any other proposals, have we? So we might see other cuts made somewhere else as well, correct? So how can we actually bring other proposals forward? It's not going to be possible, is it?
It is, unfortunate, due to the timing of this report. If the timing was right and it had gone to the previous select, the final settlement wouldn't have been announced, but it still doesn't change the outcome that we have got to come up with another set of proposals to try and balance the books. Yeah, you are correct, Chair.
Yeah, we are always told, never do the full.
Just for you to be aware, I mean, this is your opportunity to put forward any ideas and to suggest those. It isn't too late in terms of the budget. As you're aware, it's later this year that it's being considered. There will also be an opportunity for joint scrutiny of all the select committees, one meeting. So I would urge you not to necessarily wait until full council to say that you're not sort of content with some of the proposals. If you've got concerns, now is the time to speak up.
Okay.
Yeah, just a brief one. On your budget assumptions, you're showing a potential 4.95% increase in the council precept, council tax. The settlement from the Welsh Government wasn't good in terms of what we really want, but it was better than what we expected. Will this change your perceptions of the 4.95% potentially increase in council tax? Will you believe that will be recommended to come down or stay where it is?
In terms of council tax, it would have to stay at 4.95%, because if it came down, that's all you would do was widen the budget gap that we currently got. So it would have to stay at 4.95% of the proposals. That still leaves us with a budget gap due to the final settlement not being as generous as we thought, and no funding being offered by government in order to bridge that 1% increase in the pay lift on public sector pay.
Okay. Is there any talk of actually going over that threshold of 4.95? Have we heard of any talk of it? Because we need to balance. We can't set a deficit budget. Pardon? Yeah.
No, there's no further proposals, but in terms of the guidance from Welsh Government, it says the cap should be 5%. That is only guidance. It doesn't mean that we can't exceed 5%. If we look across the border into England, England can actually set much higher council tax because they have actually got an adult social care precept that they can add on top, and that money then is specifically creamed off the top of the council tax revenue and diverted straight to social care. Unfortunately, we haven't got that manoeuvrability in Wales where we can apply a social care precept to the council tax. So our hands are pretty much tied in terms of the council tax. Also, another misconception with council tax is if you increase it by 1%, you can get so much revenue in. Council tax is not our main source of income to the local authority. Our main source, our bulk of funding, does come from the Welsh Government settlement.
We also make, or also get contributions from the police precept. Have you had any indications of the way the police precept is going to go in the next financial year, or how does that affect our budgeting process?
We don't collect it, don't we?
Yeah, that's all we do is we're a bit like a banker on that. We collect it and pay it out in terms of the precept. What comes to us is just the local authority element of that council tax. The other add-ons in terms of community councils and the police authorities, just what we collect, and that funding is directly diverted back to themselves.
But that is a percentage of what our collection would be. Should we, for example, have a nil increase in council tax, the police wouldn't get so much, would they? So they get a bit more based on what we... Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but nevertheless, it still doesn't change the substance of the council tax that comes over to us. Is that element that we need. The fact that we might put, say, council tax to 6%, that might indirectly increase the police precept, for example, is irrelevant to us in terms of what we can get in order to balance it. No, you are right, in terms of the public, but at the end of the day, we have got to look at what we can get in order to balance the books. That's the problem that we need to try and solve. In terms of the way forward, it is looking at these task groups and whether we can come up with any other alternatives, which will be subject to a separate paper on how we can now bridge this new budget gap that has been landed on us in the past couple of weeks.
Could I just ask, before I let you in, Louise, then, so we've got a budget gap, we've set up, some officers are working now how we can fix this gap. When will we know whether the gap's been fixed or not, and when will we have the consultation on? And I'll just give you an example. Let's just say that we have to fine £250,000 and it's got to come out of your budget. And we need to know then where it's coming from. When will that be?
February time.
February, okay.
Yeah.
And am I talking 1%, tell me whether I'm wrong or not, 1% increase, so go from 4.95 to 5.95 is about 300k, more or less, give or take, that we would raise by I'm just going off past experience with Joy Robson there. Is it about 300k, 1% increase?
You're not off the mark on that,
okay.
Chair. Yeah,
okay, so
it is surprising, 1%. The public perception, if you go back to your point, is we can get lots of money from that. It doesn't really translate to a lot. If you look at our revenue budget of £152 million, a 1% increase is not a lot in percentage terms. If you look at that, it's like 0.1%. So increasing council tax doesn't really generate the kind of revenue we need. The only way it can be done is through additional income generation ideas that we might have to boost our income. Invariably is going to end up going down to additional savings targets, or can we get a little bit leaner, can we do things differently that can be done on a cheaper cost basis, unfortunately.
I proposed last budget 1% increase, but it was to be ring fenced solely for that purpose. And that goes back to your issue you were saying in England, they actually ring fence, but we can't do it in Wales, can we? No.
Unfortunately, no. Those strategies are set nationally. We are not England, we are Wales, and across the border, like I mentioned, they have got this adult social care precept. I can't remember what authority in England, I think it was Surrey, that when they were under budget pressure, that's all they done was whacked up the council tax to, I think, 12%. All of a sudden, and they become this pilot for working differently. But unfortunately, we haven't got those additional precepts we can load on top.
Okay, questions, members? Paul?
Only just one observational point or adding point. Just the final government budget hasn't been approved yet, which is due to go to plenary next week. And while there is an agreement or tacit agreement between the Labour and Plaid, this additional burden, this additional payment burden might come back, and there might be some additional political pressure there that may change that next Tuesday. So, watch this space. That might change.
That is a very good point. I got to be honest, it's fingers crossed time. It's always nervous for us as an accountants this time over Christmas, New Year, waiting for the provisional settlement, the final settlement. There are a number of burdens on the local authority. You've just mentioned in terms of the pay award. We've got the Chancellor, where he announced about 2 years ago where national living wage was going to increase from the then, I think it was £6.50 up to £9 in 2021. The burden of that is absolutely phenomenal. In terms of social care, the the pressures in that report that was presented to, we've got pressures of about 1.1 million. Of that, £500,000 of that is just the national living wage going up currently from 750 to 787 or whatever. That's a phenomenal amount of money. We can't really do a lot of that. We just end up being an in and out. The capital threshold, for example, is increasing. It was £24,000 that residents could keep when they come into residential nursing care that's subject to local authority funding. The commitment made by the government is for that to increase to £50,000. Even though they pumped a sum of money into Wales for that, due to the funding formula, we ended up getting the lowest share of it. But unfortunately, as an authority in Wales, we must really got the highest impact because we have got more wealth in the county. The impact of that has led to a pressure of £500,000. £500,000 this current year, 17-18, £500,000 for next year. And I think then with it going from 40,000 to 50,000, that leaves us the balance of the year of £668,000. It is phenomenal sums of money we're talking about. I'm not saying they're not good initiatives. I can support them. I can understand where they're coming from, but they do come with a hefty price tag.
Paul, again?
Just to come back on that, and this might be for the head of service, in terms of, because due to the fragility of the independent market, what likely impact is that is the pay award and particularly the living wage going to have locally on some of our providers?
It clearly is a burden, and I would want to reiterate that it's actually a very good thing. And actually, if we want a care market that is sustainable and can grow, then this investment in that needs to be there. That said, some of the impacts, just thinking about our previous conversation around Chepstow Community Hospital, the same issues are prevalent around recruiting an appropriate workforce. And I was encouraged to hear some of the comments that were being made. We had a meeting last week actually with our housing colleagues to look at how could we incentivise the use of accommodation against inward migration of people to come and work in the care sector. Is that a strategy that we would want to employ? We're looking at all angles to try and actually develop a future that is sustainable. In terms of the capital threshold issue, I think the factors that we've got to be aware of, as Tyrone mentioned, is that if you think of the sector, I'm thinking about residential and nursing care sector, so 14 care homes in Monmouthshire, we have a 27% share of that market, so we're a tiny, in a sense, bit of that market. The rest is a mixture of people who are self-funding through their own means or are being sponsored through community health care funding through health. So the health people you can leave to one side, generally speaking, but the other big percentage in there is people who are privately funding. Now, clearly, as the threshold rises, their ability to come to us as their means drops increases, and that's where the prediction of the money is coming from, is saying that actually we're likely to see an increase. Whereas if you're funded in a different authority, some of our neighbouring authorities, their percentage of sponsorship of the market is much, much higher. They're in the 70-odd% that they are currently funding. Now, the issue for us is around how do we influence the shape and direction of that market, which I know was talked about in the last select meeting around the need to have some sort of wider strategy. But it is quite a complicated and complex issue. But I think the funding formula moving forward, we have to be able to predict what might the impact be. And of course, we don't have any room for manoeuvre around that. It is as is. What we have to do is make sure that we're on top of the demand, that we've got as many options going in to support people to stay strong in the community, really, wherever possible. That still costs, but yeah. I do.
Jane?
Thank you, Chair. I'm concerned, obviously, about our ability to deal with an unforeseen event that might happen. Could you just explain under 3.37 the approved reserve strategy and just give us sort of a bit of meat around that? Because I'm just really concerned. The last council I worked on, we actually had a very nasty situation where we had to to fund to young people who had committed a murder in a secure unit, and it ended up costing £2 million. And, you know, if something like that happens, you know, what sort of a state are you in to cope with it? And can you just explain how the reserve strategy works and how we would deal with the crises? Thank you.
In terms of the reserves, unfortunately, I haven't got any good news to give you on reserves. Our reserves to a point where they are more or less the minimum that the Welsh Audit Office recommend that a local authority needs in order to be viable. So we haven't got buckets of reserves sitting there that we can just plug the budget gap. Those days are unfortunately gone. In terms of the reserve strategy, if we do spend reserves, they have to be replenished, because we can't go below the minimum percentage of where reserves need to be. So in effect, with reserves, if we want to call on reserves, that pound that we call on reserves has got to be, one, a good pound spent, and two, has got to be a pound that we can get back in the future in order to replenish. It's not an exhaustible stream of money that we can just use to balance and not get it coming back in. So unfortunately, we can't use reserves to balance any budget gap. In terms of in-year demands, we get that anyway. If I draw your attention back to the forecast reports that I end up bringing, the forecast report, if it does forecast an overspend, we have to try and balance that either from underspends within other directorates, or reserves ultimately will have to try and balance it at the end of the year. So we have to make sure there are enough reserves. So if we did have, for example, that case that you mentioned, we would either have to look for other directorates to try and help us underspend to balance the box, or we'd have to get reserve to try and balance it at the end of the year.
I mean, this is a question, it doesn't seem to be covered in the report, but when I went through the hundreds of pages of the draft budget that went to Cabinet previously, it did mention one of the issues was about cutting buses on a Sunday, and obviously across Monmouthshire, and this would have implications. We were talking about the need for transport, not only to the hospitals from, say, Chepstow to the Royal Gwent, or in other areas to hospitals, and visits are take place on a Sunday, but also obviously the council is thinking of developing the Crick Road facility, and again, you know, public transport is important to retain for this particular area. So I think it's something that does really need to be re-examined, because you know, even if you're talking about current links between Chepstow and the Royal Gwent, I mean, Sunday is a hospital visiting day, and if you're elderly and you haven't got a car, you do rely on the public transport. So cutting that seems to be going against what supporting adults who are in need of care and help.
You are right to point that out. It does sort of fly in the face a little bit. It is difficult. Unfortunately, we've got to try and make some sort of difficult decisions or put difficult recommendations to yourself to try and cut the budget. As mentioned to you, we haven't got the reserves or any other pockets of money that we can use. We are that lean at the moment. Unfortunately, any variation does have an impact on us, and we have to come up with these proposals to try and balance the books. There's no quick wins, there's no low-lying fruit that we can take. We took that 3-4 years ago. We haven't got a lot of fat in the budgets that we can trim anymore. Those days are gone. Unfortunately, any decision brought to yourselves or that goes up for public consultation is going to be the difficult ones. However, it is a valid point. I will pass that back to the lead officer, Roger Hoggins, that is involved in that transport review, and put those concerns back to him as feedback from this select. No problem, thanks.
Could I just ask then, on that point, Louise, it's very valid there. It's not in this document here. You must have picked that up from, let's say, Strong Communities, somewhere like that, did you?
No, I picked it up from going through about 300 pages of the budget that on a draft report that went to Cabinet before Christmas.
Okay, so during that process then, where you've picked that up, is there any other issues which actually we should be looking at which are coming to light on them kinds of proposals for changes and cuts in service which will have an implementation on delivering services for you, Julie, within the next financial year? Because they're not in the report, are they? And we're scrutinising a budget here to make recommendations. One's been picked up by Councillor Brown there. There must be others there, aren't there, Julie? Or are they not?
Just, I mean, in terms of the strategy moving forward for us, as Ty's, ably described, there really isn't anything in terms of where do we go. One of the directions of travel that we've taken is it's all about making sure that we operate differently, that we try and minimise wherever possible the approach to not stopping people from coming to us, but ensuring that we've got an infrastructure that supports people, whether it's through advice, information and assistance, whether it's through supporting communities. And actually we've continued that direction of travel. We've looked, and I don't really like using the word, but we've looked forensically at every single line of our adult services business and tracked back over the last 4 or 5 years and looked and said, where else could we go? We're at the end of the road, so that you won't find specific savings targets around service cuts in the adult services arena, because unless, well, the only next step is stop doing things, and we haven't, and it feels too hard to do that. So interestingly, Councillor Brown's point about the impact of a decision made somewhere else, clearly there are going to be a range of options put forward across the council, and we do have to do the read across to say, what is the impact if somebody's making a change here? Does it impact on other council services or residents are impacted as a result of? And we're looking across and having those conversations to say, if somebody's doing that there is going to be a down the line impact around us, which could cost us money actually. So we've got to look at it in the round, but there are no specific actual targets from the top of my head that I can think of. Ty, are you going to correct me? Or I don't think, from my knowledge, it's about continuing the practice change. It's continuing those what matters conversations with people, helping people with the resources that they've got, maximising all of that opportunity. For us, it's been about a different way of operating. And to be fair, that has and does continue to save money. But it doesn't. We don't take the big ticket items out because that's part of the infrastructure and the jigsaw puzzle that keeps it moving forward.
I mean, my understanding is that some of the transport issues are to do with the cuts that we've got from Welsh Government in terms of grants and so forth. And I just wonder whether there's any opportunity, to campaign on this because of the implications it's having under wellbeing legislation as an argument in itself. That it's taking away vital communications for health services.
Was the evaluations report with that though? Because if you've got to do them nowadays, and if there is a cut there, no, there wasn't, was there not? Okay, something we can pick up on. Okay, thanks, Louise.
What I'll do in terms of the transport one, I will take that back. Just for clarity, there is a savings proposal for adult services. It is in the report, Chair. But like Julie said, just to clarify on that, there's nothing specific leading to a cut in services. But if I draw your attention to page 50 and 51, the savings proposals there that myself and Julie put together for 18-19, there's a savings target of 638k, and then consequently for the years after that is 536k. So that does cover the lifespan of this medium-term financial plan that's been presented to you today. In terms of the 638k, that will be a budget reduction to the social care budget going into next year. But as Julie elaborated on, we have got a strategy around that, and it is around practice change. This is something that we've been on the journey now for a number of years, isn't it, Julie?
2011.
And there has been significant targeted savings against this, and we'll just have to continue on that trajectory moving forward. That is the only area that we can look at. We can't look to increase income generation. Unfortunately, government have put a cap on that. If you look at domiciliary care, the cap is a maximum of £70 a week. I've been pestering Welsh Government. I'm sure they love me down in Cardiff. I'm looking at whether that's going to increase, because the government made a commitment that to increase to £100 a week in 2022. So by my reckoning, it should go up to about £80 a week next year. But that won't get us a lot more in terms of income generation, because what I'll have to do is assess everybody, and they may only be able to pay what they're currently paying now. So that might not be a rich source of income for us. But we haven't got a lot of places to go in terms of adult social care, unfortunately. But it was just to highlight that there is actually a savings proposal that has been, yeah, exactly. But that is there for your consideration and feedback today.
Okay. Just one thing, Tyrone. Can you make sure that they do the impact assessments with them savings, which implement on our portfolio here, say what Louise point there about the cuts in transport, which have been made by somebody else, what impact that would have? Because you've got to do the IAQs, wherever you call them, because it's a legal document now, and they need to be within that cut. They need to have that document with it also. Can you make sure that you make that point to the officers or whoever that they've got to do that as well, and it will then highlight that that cut could cause. Yeah.
I would definitely stress that, because you are right. It is a legal requirement, and quality impact should be done on any proposal. Right. When I go back to the lead officer, I will stress that. That is a very valid point.
Okay. And may I just ask, to Julie, you've got to make savings of 600 and something. I know I'm going to use the right word here. Quality of service. Will residents of Monmouthshire still have that quality of service? Because that's so important. You've got to make the savings. You're going to find them. There's no cuts in service, but it's that quality of service we'll have. So it may be that we can't offer the quality, or can we guarantee we can offer the quality? Because it will be us as members who will take the backlash of that when we don't seem to see them as much, or they don't come as quickly because of whatever. Can we guarantee that? Or
I could, put my mortgage up here. No, I'm only joking. I mean, obviously, this isn't something that is just starting now. We have been on this journey of transformation and practice change since 2011. So this is more of the same. So we would have felt the drop in quality by now, because actually some of the bigger amounts that we've had to take out in previous years have been very, very testing. But this is all underpinned with an approach to practice that is very, very important. Unless we change the conversation and do things differently with people, and that's all about how well trained our staff are, how everybody buys into the approach that we're trying to develop with people in Monmouthshire, which is, how do we enable people to be resilient? How do we make sure that they've got the right support at the right time? And that tiered support. So people, just thinking about the isolation and loneliness question, we've got lots of programmes of support that are around that and that are delivering and trying to expand the coverage to those people who are isolated and vulnerable. And I'd see that at a very sort of community-based level. So that's one level, and we're investing in that. And then at the top end, people who are stuck in hospital today. In fact, one of our service managers, bless her, has broken her shoulder, and she's in there doing a bit of a study for us now. So, but actually that top, we've got to be able to, we've got to be fleet of foot on both ends and in the middle of all of that care support that's needed. And we've proved ourselves to be very successful at that. And that's because of our integrated platform with others. So whether that's occupational therapists, physiotherapists, nurses, we have an integrated approach. And we have a workforce that gets the approach. So I would like to say that quality is not in question. Okay. But if we had to suddenly, the big worry for me is that if we suddenly were presented with a challenge that said you've got to find, and you have to, I don't know, £5 million or something, and we had to dismantle, that's when I'd be saying cannot now manage the quality at all. So it's a finely balanced jigsaw puzzle, and that's working.
All right, thank you. Can I just add to that? I know some of you members are still relatively new. You haven't been on this journey with us. That's all I can assure you is, if you look at previous track record, we've always made these savings targets. It is getting harder and harder, but we have got good quality staff that are, and we wouldn't put anything forward to you as members that would actually jeopardise you. We're not there just for making up figures for figure's sakes. We do go through this and we do pay the due diligence and needs before we put any proposals to yourselves.
I think that the statement was made because we can fill a pothole, but what quality of fill do we put in there? You see my point? and I think that's, many of us here do have representation made to us about the care that some people have in their homes and why am I paying this and why it's not as good as it used to be. And that does happen because at the end of the day we've only got one budget to work with and we've got to try and squeeze that. And the sad thing about Monmouthshire is, and I will make the comment, is we always seem to balance the budget and manage. And I always make the point of is when my kids ask for more dinner money and they're looking well, I ain't going to give them any more dinner money. So we always manage. And I say, the Welsh Government or whoever down there, we always manage. So they ain't going to come and say, oh, well, we feel sorry for this year. Because we always manage, and I think others are coming on board now. How we've had to take these things, the others are now seeing that actually what we've had to see for many years now is coming on them also. So good luck to them. We'll keep managing.
Well, there's a price to pay.
There is a price to pay, long term, yes. Yeah.
And unfortunately, sometimes you become a victim of your own success.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, with Monmouthshire, we always end up being bottom of the league table. Whenever there's money being offered out in terms of grants, how that's split, we always end up having the lowest lion's share of it. In some things, we've got we suffer the highest impact. But again, it is officers on the ground that actually make that work. If I look at Julie and her team, I don't know a better set of trained social worker accountants than I've ever seen because they know the figures better than me. So we have instilled that budget monitoring right throughout, and it is a fine balance of scales between quality, delivery, and trying to make the books balance.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jane.
Yeah, I don't want to be political, but a couple of years ago, the Secretary of State did secure a better settlement for Wales, and it's my understanding for every pound that English Council gets, the Welsh Government get £1.20, but this is just not filtering down to us, and we're not receiving this increase.
Yeah, there are good initiatives out there, like Julie mentioned, promoting the national living wage. That's only got to be a good thing. I appreciate what you're saying, and you can't take away those good endeavours to get a better settlement for Wales. How that is then split across the 22 local authorities, that's where the problem lies. And also, where you come up with these initiatives and the amount of funding is not matched with it. For example, national living wage. Absolutely brilliant incentive, you get a happier workforce. But how is that funded? And even if it is fully funded, once you put it through the older person's funding formula, poor old Monmouthshire then comes out at the bottom, but it's got to be funded. So we've then got to try and reduce our core services to try and make those books balance. It is a difficult juggling act. And then you've got on top of that, you've got the demographic pressures, so on and so forth, other initiatives that come in. It is a pressure that we are facing. And next to education, social care holds the biggest share of the budget, not only in Monmouthshire, but every other local authority, and that's where the pressure. If you look at the news, I think there's only about 3 or 4 items that are constantly on the news. It's either the health service I was dealing with pressures, is education, and is social care needs, whether that's adult in terms of dealing with older people, or I was servicing children's services needs. That's where the pressure is on us nationally. Sorry, if I just go through this briefly, I know having 2 heavy finance reports and me droning on is enough, but if I keep this very brief, that's slightly different in terms of item 6. If I quickly skirt you through to page 63, if I get down there as quick as I can myself. In terms of the capital budget, again, this is for you to consider and provide feedback. The capital budget is just made up from existing priorities that have been there from the previous medium-term financial plan and any other programmes that we never managed to get through in terms of 17-18 being carried forward through to 18-19. They've been identified in 3.1 on page 64. It's just worth noting to members that if anything new needs to be added to the capital programme, it's either got to be self-financing or it's got to displace an existing scheme. In the interest of Adult Select, in terms of DFG's Disability Facilities Grant, in terms of the 18-19 proposal, we're looking to push an extra £300,000 as a one-off injection through the capital programme into DFGs. In terms of the capital medium-term financial plan, they are highlighted in sections 3.2 to 3.8, inclusively in pages 65 to the top of 67. Capital resources are shown in notes 3.9 to 3.31, 3.13, sorry, which is pages 67 through to 68. In terms of the net result, it can be seen in Appendix 2 if you just want to get a quick overall summary on page 75. For 18-19, we're looking at setting a capital budget of 30.3 million, which is fully financed.
Okay.
In terms of Adult Select as well, we haven't got a big capital programme, so there's nothing to highlight to you in terms of impact on this select committee.
Okay. So there's no projects out there, Julie, within Adult Select which you feel need to go forward and the money's there for them. I remember Mardy Park, that was one, wasn't it? Have we any others? No, nothing at all. Has the centre in Abergavenny Leisure Centre been done? That was being used for children's services, wasn't it? For the old caretaker's bungalow. Yes, the old caretaker's bungalow.
King Henry VIII.
King Henry VIII.
Yeah,
at the Leisure Centre. That's all sorted.
That it hasn't gone. We've taken that over as a contact centre.
Yeah.
As well as a site in Collycott as well. That's all been done.
That was capital though, wasn't it? I think, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it had a little bit of capital funding. We did a little bit of revenue funding towards as well, but that's all been done and established.
It's all done, and there's no projects out there. No. Okay. Any questions? No. Okay. Right. Thank you. Do you want to go into the other one, the closed document with the assets? I've shut the live streaming down, or you can. Is there anything there? I think I'm on page 83 here. Not for publication, but it's the assets, yeah, the capital. Well, and actually they are important. It's all to do with the capital programme as well, delivering the capital programme. Just a second.
If you did want to go through this, we would need to go into committee, which would mean we'd have to turn off the live streaming. We're unable to turn that back on, so it would be a suggestion that you would do that at the end of the meeting. You've got a performance report also on this agenda, so it depends whether members really want to delve into the closed documents or not.
Do you want to do it at the end? I want to ask a question about one on there. Actually, I need to ask something on there. Can I do it at the end then? Everybody happy we'll do that at the end?
Well,
yeah?
if you do that, if you want to just send me a message and then come back in.
Won't take long. I won't disappear.
Okay.
Right. Everybody happy with that? Yep. Okay. And you'll report back once we get these final calculations done for the revenue budget. We'll see some sheet or an email on that, what the final proposals are, i.e. whether there's anything to be done within your portfolio, Julie, or not extra.
Any overall things that we come up with now will come back in February to all selects.
Yeah.
Prior to it going to cabinet, so then you can ask questions, provide feedback.
All right,
so on
great,
and so forth.
no problem. Thank you. Can you take forward the point about the transport and the
no, rest assured, I will pick that
the
up.
risk assessments, etc., and the
yeah. I will pick that up with the lead officer, Roger.
All right, thank you. All right. Right, number 5, is it performance? Yep, come. Sean Schofield. Okay, just introduce yourself, Sean, once we get going there. Performance report, adult services, quarter 2. Okay.
Thank you. I'll just run through the report and then if there are any questions at the end. So this is the quarter 2 performance report for adult services, which includes, as you've seen before, a blend of quantitative and qualitative measures. The report also contains a first look at benchmarking from 2016-17, which was the first year of data collection of the new performance framework. As such, Welsh Government highlighted some challenges and some issues with the quality of the data, and therefore published only on a Welsh average basis with quartiles but no local authority level data. The performance framework at the moment is being reviewed by Welsh Government to ensure that it is useful both to themselves and to local authorities. Just a word of warning, at quarter 2, the carers questionnaire data contains only 1 month's worth of information. Also, within this paper, we've appended in Appendix 2 additional indicators around DFGs and homelessness because they're pertinent to this committee and they're part of the public accountability framework. So if I go into the body of the report, at the front door, Monmouthshire has developed a place-based approach where advice and assistance is delivered in the community early and before people need to reach the front door of social services. Other approaches are being taken in other local authorities. And because 2016-17 data was released at all Wales level, it's difficult or unclear for us to tell at the moment how comparable different authority approaches and measures of them will be. In Monmouthshire, over 3/4 of people receiving advice and assistance didn't return to social services within 6 months. These are only the people who reach the front door of social services, so this isn't a full picture of all of the activity going on out in the community as well. Where adults need care and support, reablement is a short-term intervention at crisis point, aiming to restore people to independence and to limit the need for long-term support. 72% of people who've been through reablement were independent 6 months later. Delayed transfers of care are delays in providing social care so that people have a longer than necessary stay in hospital. By the end of September, we'd had 17 such delays, which is an increase in the same point in time last year. On average, Monmouthshire care home residents spend 795 days in residential care, but it's still unclear to us what good looks like for this measure, as no quartile data was published from Welsh Government for this particular measure. Residents in Monmouthshire have the highest life expectancy and amongst the highest healthy life expectancy in Wales, so it's reasonable to assume that they are likely to enter residential care later in life. On average, Monmouthshire residents entered residential care at age 84, which is an increase on last year, and this is due to the exclusion of younger adults who are entering temporary residential placements. Chart 5 shows that we continue to see differences between the experiences of carers and adults receiving care. So we see a lower satisfaction for carers able to do the things that are important to them and those satisfied with support from their family, friends and neighbours. And in safeguarding adults, 80% of adult protection inquiries are completed within 7 working days, which is just below the Welsh average of last year. Our safeguarding team are now recording on our central social care system, which is called Flow, which means all data is stored in one central place, and it allows us to provide better intelligence to the Safeguarding Adults team throughout the year. The Head of Services added her comments and has joined us to answer any service-related questions, and I can pick up any data or technical-related questions.
Yes, Councillor.
It's for Ms Boothroyd, really, on the safeguarding issue. And I noticed that one area where performance seems to have gone down is the delayed transfer of care figures. And again, it's that issue we were talking about earlier this morning, about the ability to find carers. But I am slightly concerned because we've got the safeguarding inspection coming up. Are you able to give us reassurances that there is a positive strategy in place to ensure that that decline that we've seen this year isn't something that's going to carry on?
Just want to check the link that you're making between DTOC and safeguarding. It's
simply that it comes under the safeguarding comments in the report.
Just taking the DTOC, the delayed transfers of care issue. Members will be aware, and you've heard me talk about this a lot, it is in a sense, it's an artificial measure because it's a census day taken once a month across the local authority with the health board saying who's in hospital at this particular moment in time. That's obviously, but it is a trend line that we look at very, very regularly. I mean, daily. We receive information daily on who's in hospital, where they are, etc., etc. We have experienced, as we've referenced earlier, some of the issues with recruiting staff, and some of our partner agencies have had difficulties recruiting staff. And we've been monitoring very closely the amount of hours that are, if you like, in the system waiting to be allocated. And that's a weekly report that we run. The model of support that we have around getting people out of hospital, we've had in place for about 15 years. It's called a pull model. So we don't, the hospital receives somebody into their care, Royal Gwent for argument's sake. We don't wait for a referral. We have 2 members of staff in the Royal Gwent and in Neville Hall who are there from 7 o'clock in the morning, literally working out who's in, where are they, how do we progress? Because our direction of travel is the best place for you is at home, not in a hospital. So wherever possible, we're trying really hard to make sure that either people are turned around at the front door if they can be, or spend as little time in hospital as possible. I think it's very important to understand that. But there are always those people who do need to stay in hospital and sometimes get stuck in hospital. And the pattern for us that is emerging is it's often the much older people, so the people who perhaps may be tracking towards going into a residential or care home, and that can be a blockage point where families, are coming to terms with the fact that that's going to be a change. The person themselves is coming to the realisation that's going to have to happen. And then there's a whole transaction of stuff that needs to happen in terms of finding a home, and that can, create some issues in families about where is it going to be, and that creates this delay. Sometimes there isn't the availability, not so much of an issue in Monmouthshire, but they may not have the availability in the specific home that's required, and that can create a problem. The other area for delayed transfer of care is where the care has moved from our responsibility over to continuing healthcare responsibility. And unfortunately, there's then a whole track of other assessment work that has to happen, which may also include people needing to have a best interest assessment because they lack capacity. And all of these things add to the potential delays. These are well rehearsed and well monitored, and lots of people are involved, particularly in that DTOC. In fact, if we counted up how much it costs to do that across the system, just to get that measure, I think there'd be some other ways. I'm vehemently regularly, along with my heads of service colleagues, saying there has to be another way of making this work. But it is a statistic that Welsh Government look at daily, and they regularly get in touch with heads of service and directors and leaders of chief execs of health boards to say, your numbers are rising or etc. In the context of our wider partners, our DTOC numbers are quite small. And I think we have to reference that. And also, if you think about the numbers that we've seen here, as a total of the population of people that we are supporting at any one time, it is tiny. And that goes for That's the same in terms of the amount of people that are in hospital at any one time. So we will know in the category of people that we are wanting to provide support to, how many are in Neville Hall and the Royal Grant at any one time. Again, tiny numbers in comparison to the nearly 2,000 people that we're supporting at home from a local authority perspective, and who else is being provided support from a primary care perspective. So we do have to balance that, really. It's a figure in a report, but it is a tiny bit of. But I want to assure members that we take it seriously, and we do everything we can to make sure, because at the end of the day, the thing that matters to us is that Mrs. Jones isn't stuck in a hospital bed. We've got it. That's where, you know, and actually we found ourselves in situations where we're spending quite a lot of money to, if somebody's been in, we have a number of people at the moment who we can't get support for in Usk. We're in Usk, aren't we? We have real problems in Usk, massive. It's a big issue for us. And we've actually had to think right outside of the box. So even where we've had somebody who doesn't require 24-hour care, but to get them out of hospital so that they don't deteriorate any further, we've brought agency support in so that they can get home whilst waiting for the appropriate call support to happen. So we take it really seriously, and I think that links with the safeguarding point as well, which is, you know, it is part and parcel of that same bubble, really.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Pratt and then Councillor Brown.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. If I could just ask, obviously it's very clear that we have serious issues with recruiting care staff. What strategies do we have in place? For example, you know, what are we doing with local colleges and to get people to enter this care sector? Can you just tell me? Thank you.
Obviously, it's been a problem for some time, but has got, I think in the last 12 months, got a lot worse. And we have, both at a regional level, but certainly locally, been exploring all sorts of options. To get us into a position over this winter period, and we're going to be bringing information, I think it's in the next couple of selects, on what we call Turning the World Upside Down, which is our strategy around supporting and working with the independent sector to move towards a much more relationship-based care model. Since last winter, when we had some real problems, particularly in the Chepstow area, we started a very different approach with our providers, which is weekly relationship sort of meetings, really building those relationships, bringing our in-house carers in, the outhouse carers, you know, the independent sector, and our care teams together to literally work out the rotas for the patch. So who can do what? So we've seen over the last 12 months a lot more of the sharing of care. So an agency might say, actually, I could go and do that, even though they may not, you know, we've got to do that sensitively with families. But we've been able to move from a position in Chepstow this time last year of having a deficit of 300 hours to 11 this year, and they've been able to manage much more effectively. So the teams, the workforce have grabbed hold of it themselves and said, we can mitigate some of this. It's not the big problem that we're solving for the future, but it's definitely mitigating. The other mitigating factor is that we've gone out to advert under the health umbrella, because health have had much more success in recruiting health and social care support workers under the health banner. So we've just recruited 10 new workers to the Monmouth patch to cover the Usk patch, that's going to help manage that deficit that we've got in Usk. So that's the sort of immediate. Longer term, and at some point we'll be bringing something to get, I'm hoping in the springtime, we're trying to launch a sort of campaign called Dare to Care, it has a number of programmes underneath it, which includes how do we go about, in the longer term, looking at some sort of social and healthcare academy. And we're talking about that across a Gwent footprint, not just a Monmouthshire footprint. So that's a longer term strategy, but also some of the other stuff we're talking about. How can we incentivise? How do we make the sector more attractive to people? It's a fantastic job. It's a fabulous job, and people who are doing the job love it. But it's got a skewed image, and you know, plus we're in quite a high employment place, aren't we? So we are looking at all the factors, and we will be drawing together some sort of more comprehensive strategy that comes forward. But in the meantime, taking action literally, proactively all over the place. So we're doing okay, even though it's a problem. We've managed to manage, and certainly here we are in the middle of winter. It's okay, she says, with everything crossed, but it's sort of okay at the moment.
Okay, Councillor Brown.
Yes, I was looking at the questionnaires on page 133 and 134 and just wondered if you wanted to comment at all about the changes in the percentages there from one year to another. Obviously we've got 16-17 and 17-18, and we've got the useful comparison with the rest of Wales. I mean, I do notice the low level as a whole of carers feeling part of the community and doing things important to them, because obviously, you know, as I was saying before, I think when we were talking about the dementia ward, about how isolated carers can feel and the importance of their support, although I noticed there's an increase in knowing who to contact, which is good. So I don't know whether you can comment on the changes on the adults questionnaire and the carers questionnaire in the percentages there. Thank you.
I mean, I think it's fair to say that was it last year that we changed the questions on the questionnaire? So there have been some changes in the questions that are asked. The questions that were asked previously were much more around what I'd call the old-fashioned community care questionnaire that asked about services. So, are you happy with this service? Are you happy with that service? The shift in the questionnaire in the latter year has been much more about the approach that we've got. So, you know, what does matter to you? What is important? You know, are you able to feel safe, supported, etc. So there's a sort of statistical change, I think, as a result of some of the questions. But also, I think, certainly from a carer's perspective, these give us a really useful insight into, you know, how and where we need to be focusing. We have a very strong carer voice in Monmouthshire, and we have a lot of activity around supporting carers groups and carers information, and they co-authored the strategy. So I see those as very honest appraisals of what carers feel, and that helps us devise a strategy about how we take some of that forward. Loneliness, isolation, stress, all of those things are part of the infrastructure of trying to support carers moving forward. I suppose we also have to recognise that these questionnaires only go to those people who are at our front door, who have actually, if you like, come into. There is a much wider group of people that we are supporting these days who don't feature as part of this. So I think we have to see it in that wider context.
Okay, thanks for that, Julie. Paul?
Thanks, Chair. And can I at this point declare an interest, a non-prejudicial interest, as a research and policy lead for ADSS Cymru? Head of service and I have had long discussions about DTOC, and I completely agree. I think the Welsh Government needs to find another measure to look at this issue. Councillor Brown asked some of the focus I wanted on questionnaire. In terms of the early impact of the Social Care and Wellbeing Act, just trying to understand some of that. I've obviously seen the percentage of adults receiving advice and information, but I'm just interested in terms of those that are being assessed and coming through the door, both potential client users and carers. Are we seeing a reduction now? Are we really enforcing some of the contents of the Act and signposting people elsewhere? Are we reducing our assessment levels down? And I think and the other question I wanted to ask was on DFG, and just trying to understand, you know, with a new capital increase, what's the likely trajectory now? Are we going to see quite a steep fall now in terms of the average time of DFG being dealt with? Thank you.
Just to answer your first question, Councillor Pavia, it isn't included in this information because the local information that we use to monitor, if you like, our front door and the number of assessments, we hold a fortnightly meeting where we track a lot of this data, and we've been tracking it for a number of years, and we've been able to see from a point probably now 3 years ago that actually the drop to our front door is actually quite substantial. And that has come about because of the way that we, in a sense, manage the front door, but also the wider implications of the Act, which we probably started implementing way before the Act came in. So we've almost, it isn't now, we've already been living that. But certainly, and I don't have the statistics to hand, and I'm trying in my head to remember the last ones I saw, but we have a graph, which at some point we can share, which shows this very steep decline of people that are coming to our door. But the recognition that those people that are coming to our door are much more complex, much more frail, and require much more intensive support, which is actually, in a sense, the right approach. And then the people that we're supporting outside of the front door, if you like, is where a lot of the place-based well-being work is happening. And that's the bit we've got to keep strong, and we've got to keep investing in, and we've got to keep moving forward, so that actually the numbers do remain proportionate, I suppose, would be the, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to save any money. It's just it's a different demographic. But we can demonstrate that shift has really happened for us. Second point about DFGs. Just ask me the question again.
Could you just explain to people what that is?
Well,
some people.
Yes, I will. I think, even though it normally sits in the housing bit of the business, it's Disabled Facilities Grant, which is the grant allocation of money that people can apply for adapting of properties. So obviously we support a number of people through our therapy services. I'm thinking of an example, somebody who's recently been injured either in a car crash or fallen off a horse, currently finds themselves tetraplegic, living in a 3-bedroom detached house, cannot access the top floor, can come to the council and say, can I have a disabled facilities grant to alter the premise? Now, we have numbers of these a year. You can see that in the statistics of how many are progressed over a year. And a couple of years ago, there was an issue with the fact that there wasn't enough money in there, and we were actually using that money up very, very quickly and not in a position to further all of the requests, and some extra money was put in. I think it was last year. Mm-hmm. It was last year. And obviously that has helped, but we don't see this as an area that's going to go away, because these are, and as people live longer and perhaps need further support to adapt dwellings. I do think that the impact of new housing developments around, what do they call it, houses for life, will potentially have a different outcome down the line. But at the moment, we still, still quite busy in the Disabled Facilities Grant land, as it were. But it's dealt with under the housing umbrella, but as Sean says, it does impact, because these are the people, we are the people who in effect are referring people down that route, and it's our occupational therapists who are supporting people to look at how they need those grants to make those adaptations, and then physically it's done through the housing section. I hope that helps. I'm not an expert on DFG, I hasten to add.
Yeah, I think it was just, I completely welcome the steep fall that we saw from last year, which is great, and that trajectory is going down. It's just in terms of time and to get into target, but also in terms of the number of DFGs delivered, we are seeing less. We're probably not seeing less in throughput coming through. So is that just resource management, I suppose, as you said? Those who are on the list early, and they get it, and then those have to wait until the next financial year, and yeah.
And you could say that actually trying to get people out of hospital more quickly than they probably need more doing in there where they are than probably what they would do 2 or 3 weeks down the line. It may be something like that as well, might it? It's just, when you think about it all, actually there is a catch on. You're gaining one, but you're possibly losing another, i.e. the DF that want some more adaptations doing the properties and coming out a bit early.
Can I just add, there are two different things here, because disabled facilities grants are the big adaptation generally. Okay. We're talking extensions of houses, through lifts, through floors. Minor adaptations is something that's facilitated through other means. We do a lot of that through our own service provision. We have access to the Gwent store, where we access a lot of that, and Tyrone sits on the what we call the GWISIS board, which manages a lot of, whether it's simple adaptations or bath lift, that sort of portable equipment stuff, or handrails. That doesn't fit in this.
Right, okay.
This is proper big building works. It's big building works in people's houses.
So from chairlifts to alterations to major things.
Chairlifts, stair lifts, portable equipment, all the things that you can think of that you might need to be helped to get out of hospital. We do that, not a problem, straightforward, easy.
Is everybody
But
okay
Disabled
with that
Facilities
one? Yeah, you all
Grant
know about-
is
Yeah.
big adaptations to people's houses, requiring planning and all of that, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, great, wonderful. Any more questions? Tyrone.
On that, the Disabilities Facilities Grant, I just was going to highlight what Julie just said about the distinction, and also just to revert your attention back to the capital plan report that I just presented to you, and the extra 300k that we have earmarked in the capital programme next year, specifically to DFGs and the DFG programme, that should help in terms of that going forward into next year.
Any more questions? No? Okay. Thank you both. Thank you. May I ask, back to that small grants for the facilities, are we still holding Newport for that? We used to have a holding place.
We do. We have it's called GWISIS.
Right.
We're part of a Section 33 agreement with 6 authorities. We all share and place a contribution into that, and it's a contract that's run not through Newport, it's run through a private
Okay. Everybody okay with that? Yeah. Say it is handy to know, because people say like, oh, I want this, I want that, and actually it's so important, isn't it?
You can go and buy stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
What? Turn it off. Oh, sorry. On.
Thank you. Right. Are we okay? Do you want to finish off now, guys, with the members with the rest of the agenda? Tyrone, you've come in for the closed session, haven't you? Yeah. So do you just want to finish off the action list number 9? There's just a couple of things there on the action list from the last meeting, and we had asked for a list of non-statutory statutory duties versus non-statutory, and also a list of grant payments. We've had the grant payments there, I think they're on the budget there. The statutory duties that we statutorily have to carry out, and non-statutory duties. Was there an email about that? I remember seeing something there. They can actually break that down, could they?
Yes.
Did everybody receive that? Yeah. Can you remember that email coming to you about statutory duties as a councillor and non-statutory? Remember that? It was before Christmas. Yeah? Okay. I just can't remember. I thought there was an issue with it. It was very difficult to break down, and any concerns go and see him. Yes. Is that right? Am I right in saying that? Who asked the question then on that? Somebody must have asked it from here. Councillor Brown, was it you who asked the question about what was statutory and non-statutory as a council?
It's been asked at my committee. I think it was Councillor Smith.
Val? Sorry to bring you in. Val, was you happy with the response? It's on our action list here. What was statutory and non-statutory as a council?
I've got that list, and I still need to do things with it in my mind, but I have had that information. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Adult Select Forward Work Programme. The clerk needs just to have needs to have a quick word with us about what we've got lined up here.
Yes, you've got a really busy sort of couple of months coming ahead, and obviously this meeting would have been held before Christmas, but bad weather and so forth, we've held that today. So your regular meeting is the 23rd of January, and as you can see, taking a look at the work programme, the agenda is actually unmanageable, and I'm suggesting to you that you potentially need a special meeting in February, because confirmed items on the 23rd of January are an empty homes update, Gypsy and Traveller pitch allocation policy, which you've previously scrutinised before. I don't think that particular report will take a long time, but you do have also safeguarding performance and the self-evaluation of safeguarding. So those 3 items are confirmed. I'm looking to Julie because we did sort of discuss perhaps moving some of those items to this special that I'm proposing for you in February, and Care Closer to Home was one of those where we weren't sure if we could move it or not. If we can, it would be helpful for us to take it at the special meeting with Turning the World Around. If
have you got a date for the special? The reason I ask is because people are sort of not anxious, but they're trying to work out how to get it done.
If it isn't possible for them to come at that time slot, we can schedule them in later, but trying to think of another report, redesignation as shared housing accommodation, that does need to go in this special in February. So the Chair and I had a little look at the calendar, and we're proposing that a good time scale that would allow other people to take reports through to Cabinet, perhaps in March, would be, or single member decision, would be the 7th of February in the morning or the 8th of February. Both of those days are clear in the council diary. So how does that suit members?
Members, would that be?
Just from a self-interest point of view, I can make the 8th and I couldn't make the 7th, and I've already been given another rearranged meeting that week. The Democratic Services has been rearranged.
Yeah.
So the 8th would be easier for me with these changes going
8th's
on.
the Thursday. Cabinet was on the Wednesday, so we just went for that one, or the 8th is a Thursday, yeah? Yep, seems members seem fine. No, February.
Thursday, the 8th of February.
Yeah. Thursday, the 8th of February. Okay.
What, 10 o'clock?
Yeah, everybody happy with 10 o'clock start? Yeah. Yeah.
Julie, how do you think that fits for your two items? We've definitely got to take the shared accommodation report from Ian Bakewell on that meeting. We're also proposing later on perhaps a special joint meeting of CYP and adults later in February to look at the area plan, which is something Claire's mentioned, and also disability transformation work. We could take that then if you wanted to. Claire suggested that was another joint item for both committees. I mean, we can discuss this later if you like, but just thinking about that 8th of February meeting, really.
When's the next one in March? Just out of interest. Thinking of Turning the World, it's
yeah.
that I want to...
The March meeting isn't until the end of March, 20th of March, so you're almost looking at Easter time.
If we say yes for Turning the World on the 8th, and Care Closer to Home, can I let you know?
Yes, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Everybody happy with that?
I think that would be a better idea than trying to shoehorn 6 items into an agenda. I just think even if some are quite short items, you're not going to be able to do them justice.
Okay, right, thanks for that, Hazel. And we... It was Councillor Brown raised, didn't it? So it's a very good point.
We have, it might be, I don't know whether this would be useful, Councillor Brown, but we've got the business case, which lays out the approach that we've taken that went through all, the appropriate channels. And other key documents that are sort of, if you like, the context to what we're doing. And I can seek out other bit. I mean, a lot of it is in work in progress and isn't subject to formal reports. What we are looking to bring at some point, it'll be much later in the year, is some of the information that we're gathering around the stories. We're using a methodology called Most Significant Change, and we're being partnered by Swansea University to bring an evidence base around an evaluation of the work that we're doing in communities. That will be a lot later. So I'm just wondering if there's two things really. Could give you some of the pre-stuff that's how it all got set up and where we are in the next steps. And then that would be sort of useful background and reading before we then come later with, and this is how far we've got with it. Would that be of any use?
Well,
I think my particular interest is sort of, you know, in the rural isolated communities and the villages, and how, you know, there can be outreach in those particular areas. So, and I don't know what the policy is, or what the policy being developed in that particular area, or if there are pilots to do that. I mean, I obviously know there's been a lot of work done in Monmouth itself, but I'm not aware of, you know, other initiatives, and, you know, it'd be useful to know what they are in terms of, you know, good practice, and how other local communities can take this on, really.
What I'll do, if I send you some of the background information, like I said, and if it'd be useful perhaps for you to link up with some of the people who are actually tasked with doing a lot of this work. Thinking of people like Ashley Morgan and Fred, and some of the other people that we are linked with Bridges, who, even though it's based in Monmouth, they're all over the county. So I just think it might be useful for you to touch base and have some conversations with those people about what they're doing, and be able to represent the issues for your constituency, really. Yeah.
I mean, I was thinking in terms of sort of a grassroots approach with, you know, obviously because there are village halls and churches and so forth that can, and community councils, and, you know, in a sense, if you can link all of those facilities, then, you know, you have a better outreach into the rural isolated areas, really.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that we've really been trying to do is linking with those examples of where there are community halls and where there are, because actually there's a lot going on, but it's about how do we connect those people who are isolated to the stuff that is going on. How do we create the bridge where people feel that they can make that step to go to the village hall, or can accept offer from a neighbour or somebody in the village to begin to do that. That's part of what we're trying to do, is that real, like you say, grassroots, ground level stuff. So these people that I've mentioned, they are connecting with the natural connectors who are in communities now, who aren't part of statutory or third sector, they're just there, trying to really use that resource that's there to make sure that we do support people who are isolated. So I think it'd be useful for you to link up and just understand what's going on from a bigger perspective, yeah.
Yeah.
I think some of this is very organic and iterative and goes on in communities.
Organic.
And it isn't something that we as a council are responsible for or should be guiding or shaping. But I think we should be linking and supporting where we are touching people. We've got to be able to, our officers in the council and the people we employ need to understand what is going on naturally in communities and create those if you like, those connections so people can remain sustained and have purpose and all of those things that we all need. It isn't about us taking all that responsibility, putting it into a policy and measuring it. You know, I would rather. No, it is not. Absolutely not. It's at numbers of levels. No, I do not. But I think.
But I think it is about signposting people who are in need to the services that are available, isn't it?
Thank you for that, Julie. We have the work programme. Sorry, Val.
Nothing to... I've stayed quiet all morning. I came across a remarkable example of a community initiative. Somebody who'd been in hospital, neighbours aware, and what the community there does to support those individuals, they have a rota. First 10 days out of hospital, a meal. The food is delivered by individuals. And the situation that I was made aware of, in actual fact, you could have supplied them for the first 18 days. But these sort of initiatives, this was so simple and so undemanding on the community. It was, I'll do tomorrow, you do the next day. And I thought, what a great community this is. Yeah.
And that's more rural, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, without that rural side of it, like, I mean, it is sport. When you're in the towns or you're in your larger communities, it's different again, isn't it?
But I think, you know, we do have a role when we're touching people in that sort of situation. Say they're in hospital and we may be called to actually have a conversation with somebody. When I was talking earlier about the skill of our workforce, is about having those conversations. It's not about what can we offer you as the council in social services. It's much more about, so what's the network of support that you've got? How can your friends and neighbours help? And how can we support people to feel that they can ask for help from people? Because people do want to help and do want to contribute. And so I think we have to, you know, build that. We're building that as a sort of part of the resource around people, really.
The individuals actually giving the help, there's more community spirit there. They benefit, so it's an all-round plus.
Okay. Oh, thanks, Julie. Right, we've got our planner, so we've just gone through that, our programme. Hazel's explained that. We have another meeting now in January. It was 2 weeks. And what's that? Just a sec.
There's one more item to go on the 23rd, which I forgot to mention, and that's Mellin Private Leasing Scheme. So I'm glad we've organised a special, because now we can deal with those items efficiently.
No problem. Thanks, Hazel. And then we have the Cabinet Work Planner. It seems to be going out on a Friday, if people pick it up. Anybody having difficulty finding it? No? Everybody's happy with that? Yeah, updates and whatever. Okay, and our next meeting is on the 23rd of January in a few weeks' time. I'll close the meeting. Have a safe journey home, everyone. Thank you. Oh, sorry.